Hi everyone, it's Margaret Manning here. Welcome to lifeafterdeath.com. Lifeafterdeath.com is a community of people like you who are interested in the topics of life after death, the afterlife, and other issues related to spirituality. So we're going to be having open discussions with experts in different areas, and my guest today I am welcoming is Linda Fitch. Linda is a teacher, a trainer, and a shaman. She has studied and worked with Inca medicine men and women in Peru and have been a teacher of shamanic energy medicine for over a decade. She is the developer of the Dying Consciously Teacher Training Program, which is and trained thousands of students in how to do shamanic healing techniques. Her workshops and programs also include experienced neuro-linguistic programming, shamanism, grief, and ritual. She has a passion for service to the world, and I am so happy to have you here, Linda. Welcome.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. I wanted to give a bit of an introduction to you because you have such an interesting background, and I wanted to make sure that in addition to being a shaman, which people may not know what that is, you've got a lot of other things going on that relate to that.
Yeah, when I teach, I try to bring everything to the table because there's so many skills, even though shamanism is that core and that ancient practice, all of these pieces add up to the skills that we can do in this modern world. It's really about how do we bring that into today. It's not about becoming the Indian or becoming the person from the past. It's like, how do we be present now with our loved ones? Well,
that is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because we talked previously about how the tradition of shamanism and how it really, the practices, have developed over time. But how about how it relates to this today? I mean, like you say, what's the how-to? I mean, what are some of the practices in this modern world that incorporate shamanistic principles? So let's talk about that.
Well, in our modern world, and I look at that, how do you be that modern day shaman? So yes. It is that how do we be more effective every day, whether you're retired or whether you're working or whether you've got kids, grandkids, how do you be more effective now?
Yes, and happy.
Full of joy. Full of joy and vitality.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, Margaret, because that really relates with death. Because when we get to that time at the end of our life, it's that unfinished business.
Yes.
It's the stuff where we didn't say the I love yous, the places we haven't forgiven ourselves for whatever happened or we haven't forgiven another.
So
that's
true.
Actually what holds in our physical body.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm just nodding in agreement. The community, as we've spoken to them, really is full of that kind of regret. And I think the grief is about not finishing, what you wanted to. So how do you get to the point through some of the practices you are, familiar with, to be more at peace and joyful?
Yeah. And maybe let me talk a litl bit about that, that regret, how it holds us and why it's so important for people to work on it.
Yes, please.
So if we look at, from a shamanic perspective, and from a neurological perspective, we hold our physical body, and there's certain processes there. And then we have an energetic body that goes around us. And a lot of people that are sensitive can actually feel the energetic body. And then we have our emotions, we have our ego, we have the mind part of it, but this energetic part. So what legend and lore talks about when we die, what happens is all of our wisdom, our knowledge, our ideas, all of that, actually what they talk about goes to the top of the mountains.
It goes to the top of the mountains,
of the mountains. If you think about it, the mountains. So historically, this is where you go for enlightenment. The
caves of the monks.
That sits at the top of the mountain. You see it in cartoons, to go to the mountains for wisdom. So our wisdom, and everybody has access to that. It isn't just, when I die, it's like that wisdom is there. And that's part of what every spiritual tradition or path talks about. How do you access that stillness, the wisdom from all the gurus? And
so just ask you a question. What role does the energetic body play in our lives? I mean, what does it do? Is it connected to our physical body, or is it something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Connected to our physical body. So when we die, the physical body goes back to the earth. It's just chemicals anyway.
Right.
but it's our energetic body from a shamanic view that actually goes, and different traditions talk about it different ways,
Yes, yeah.
whether it's Buddhist, but it will actually go through we all of our chakras. So our chakras are these energy
Yes.
centers in our body,
Mm-hmm.
and they disengage, and that energetic body will actually leave the physical body.
And
And
does it have consciousness of any kind?
I was attending, there's a wonderful conference that's held in the United States called the Afterlife Awareness Conference.
Okay.
And they had a doctor that was talking about the weight of that. They actually weighed people and measured the weight of when that energetic body left the physical body.
I never thought about that. That is very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, and that's the essence of who we are. I mean, this is just carbon. This is just, this is water, the body itself. But that essence of who we are, what the shamans or what indigenous cultures hold, is that it goes back to the stars.
Wow.
Back to source. A little drop of creation goes back to that. There's a whole practice called dream yoga. And it's the same thing. How do we do that next step over and go back to the stars?
Well, can you practice it? Can you practice in your lifetime? Is that lucid dreaming? Can you make that journey happen before you die?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and we actually want to practice the journey because what happens is when we die, one of the ways I heard it talked about, that I love it from the Tibetan, is that part of what keeps our ego in check, our mind in check, is our physical body. Mm. So then when we die and we no longer have this check for the mind, which is the physical body, then are we ready to face that ego, the unfinished business, those forgiveness places, the grief places, that, the lost places? Are you ready to face that? So from a shamanic perspective, we want to work on that now, because when this energetic body leaves, and it could leave, Laura talks about, and different traditions, that which chakra it leaves talks about whether you have to come back around again.
Interesting. Wow.
So and our goal, you hear that, we want to leave right from the top of our head. We want to go to the white light. We don't want to have to come back and down around if you held that tradition.
So practice is good. Practice dying is a good technique, or good.
But we want to do it while keeping the body healthy.
Yes.
We don't want to end up in the ER. That's so hard on the body, and there's a chance you might not come back.
Okay, and that's so how do you nourish it then? How do you nourish this? Yeah.
So the energetic body is hooked. Yes. How's it hooked to the physical body? Through the chakra system. One of the glues. It has another glue too. It's because we're alive. There's energy that runs up and down our spine, and that holds it. Okay. And then our chakras. So what happens when we die is our chakras lift up and out of the body. Mm-hmm. And then the energy field goes in. So now, while we still have this body, people can go through and they can allow that place. So it goes back to that place of journey that the shamans do. But the reason we really want to clear up the old things is when we have unfinished business, forgiveness that needs to be done, those old issues or regrets, they actually feel like heavy. They're heavy. It's called heavy energy. They feel like a rock.
You can't lift.
You can't lift off.
Yeah.
You can't lift off. So you hear and see this when people, when they're on the deathbed and they're not ready to go. I haven't said that to Johnny, or I haven't.
Yes.
So that last moment gives us such a chance of letting go. And if the person was a jerk their whole life, they might be a jerk on the deathbed. But it is a window of huge transformation. But if we do the work now, then that window, we're not having to go through and do that. That window is truly then about being present with our loved ones. So it's a whole practice. How do we be present all the time?
So Linda, in the Tibetan tradition, you have the bardos and the stages that you go through. And at the moment of death, there is meant to be, if ideally, somebody there by your side to remind you, like you're saying, of how to go on that spirit journey. Now, I understand in shamanism, there is something called a spirit flight. Is that what you're describing, or is that a practice that you do to get to that place? Is it similar to the bardo?
Well, you've got two of them. That's awesome questions. So, Margaret, one of those is who's with you. So, they actually, there's a word for that. They call it a psychopomp, is what it is.
Okay.
So it's a Greek word, and it comes from the
Psychopomp.
guide. Yeah, pompos is the guide, and then psyche is that breath. So it's the guide of the breath.
The guy with the breath, yeah.
And it depends on different traditions. So in Asia, one of those, a lot of times traditionally it's a white crane. Down in Peru, where I've studied from the cultures that are on the Amazon, they have in the Amazon River these pink dolphins. And so it's the pink dolphin that guides them.
That's a reason to go to Peru, just to see.
Oh, they're amazing.
So keep going. Okay, go ahead.
But it can also be loved ones. It could be a spiritual guide that shows up. It's many times traditionally in the indigenous cultures, it's the medicine man, the medicine woman, the shaman.
Right.
And now modern days, we're calling them death doulas, death walkers.
Yes.
It's all the same thing. And I would bet anything some of our people that are listening actually do this as a practice where they sit with others. Life has just orchestrated that they sat with the death of their spouse. They sat with the death of a friend. They sat with the death of another friend. They sat with the death of an uncle. It's so interesting how that just happens. And it's so in the reason we want to know about it is that we want to make sure that we can walk with somebody over to the other side. That's what the shaman does, the psychopomp does. But then we want to walk home clean.
Back. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to bring anything from the other side back, because that's what can happen.
And you're talking, I'm getting goosebumps all over me, because you are just saying that really it doesn't have to be a sort of a person who's certified as a psychopomp. It could be a friend. I remember just a very quick story. It's just such a beautiful one. One of our women in our community, I asked the question, do you remember your first kiss? And it was meant to be an article on dating and on relationships. And someone came back and says, yes, I remember my first kiss. I'm sitting by the deathbed of the man who gave it to me. And she said, he was my first boyfriend and my first kiss, but then he and I separated for 50 years. And now he is here in hospice and I'm by his side. It was just the most beautiful story that this woman had met this man, her first kiss, and then 50 years later was being his. I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, your story was beautiful. So did you hear there? Yeah, she was sitting there in hospice with him.
Yeah, but she was his psychopomp. And I hope we didn't lose any of that in that little internet blip. But we took a little spirit journey there, I think. So, anyway.
And that's what some of the modern steps. So, we're talking to the audience. We're like, what do we do now?
Yes.
So first encouragement, through our Western world would put death like, oh, let's take it to the hospital so I don't have to deal with it. If in olden days, we would have had grandma in the parlor.
Yes.
We would have gone to, instead of just putting it off to the hospital and the doctor, and then, no, I don't want to see it. So as we get to this stage, we want to become familiar and work with death.
Right.
But then if you're sitting with somebody else, you can actually help them by asking those things like, do you have regrets? Are there things that need to be shared? And sometimes just saying them in these spaces as we get to this time, just saying that allows it to be shifted and changed.
Yeah.
And then let those, you can have the grief altar there, talk about the losses. And then you can actually help that person, what are your memories? What do you remember about them? Let go of that old stuff, let go of the old pieces with it to make us light so we can go on that spirit flight.
So you're talking here about practices that are very simplistic in a way. I mean, they're really human. They're just sharing. But are there any other physical practices like, touching or chanting or anything that medicines, any other practices that are more specific to dying in the shaman tradition?
The other practice is to help. So without getting too complicated, what happens, we talked about that the chakras hold that energetic body to the physical body.
Yes.
So that heavy energy that's like a rock, it'll actually hold in the lower chakras, which is right above the pubic bone.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually, the chakras look like a well. They kind of look like this.
Okay.
And you can actually reach in and clear that heavy energy out.
With a massage.
Oh,
Wow.
or just with your hands. You can just reach in. Imagine that the chakra well comes out a couple inches above the body.
Okay.
So it looks like that.
Okay.
It kind of looks like that. And you just reach in and you clear the heavy energy. So as somebody's sharing with your intention, it's really about intention, that we hold intention for another person. As they're sharing, it's like, great. So what would allow you to let that go? And then you can actually energetically help move that heavy energy off their body.
Okay. Well, you do a workshop, don't you? That's what you teach is shamanistic energy medicine. And so please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're so good. So I'll take a half second to do that. Because yes, I have one that's coming up in this next month. That's called the Mastering the Art of Holding On and Letting Go.
Wow.
Death and dying practices, it's an art form. How do we really be in tune with that?
Yeah.
So, and knowing that we're all going to touch it, that death, and that's what makes us so afraid of it.
Well, that in itself is a modern practice that's really interesting. You're doing it as a shaman yourself to bring the shamanistic tradition to. Well, I'm assuming you're not doing it online, but you're using technology to talk about it and to promote it and to let people know about it.
I'm doing it online.
Oh, you're doing it online?
I'm doing it online. Yeah. Wow. I've taught this one for 20 years in person.
Okay.
And I've had so many people that, like, Linda, gosh, the practices I learned as I sat with my mom. A woman emailed me and she goes, Linda, I felt like I was always distant with my sister. Her sister died unexpectedly. She goes, what she did, hadn't even taken a class. She went online and she printed off the steps. And she said, I took my piece of paper to the hospital. Wow. And I followed the steps you had. And she goes, it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. It's the closest I've ever been with my sister. And there was so much healing that happened. She goes, it changed my life. So it'll be online. I'm
going to sneeze. Hold on. I got a cold and it's itching in my nose. What I was going to suggest is go up to Linda's website. It's LindaLFitch.com, and I'm sure you've got all the information there, and just take advantage of that if you are able to, but I'm sure you've got other articles to read. But this has been so interesting, and we're doing a series of these interviews and chats, so please take a look at the next one. But I hope this is kind of giving you some ideas of the modern ways that shamanistic tradition is alive and well, and there's people like Linda around to prove it. So thank you so much, Linda. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our Life After Death YouTube channel and visit our website at lifeafterdeath.com. We are a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death and subjects like near-death experience, the afterlife, reincarnation, and spirituality. Together, we are exploring and discovering these topics together with curiosity and an open heart.